Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishna Beitza, Perek Dalet, chapter 4, Mishna Zayin, Mishna 7. Ein moitzian es ha'ur, one cannot produce fire. Loi min ha'etzim, not from wood, from rubbing two pieces of wood together. Loi min ha'avanim, not from stones that are rubbed together. Loi min ha'afra, not from dirt. It seems like there was a certain kind of dirt that when you hit it with a shovel, it used to spark. V'loi min hamayim, nor from water. Water here means you're taking a glass of water, or a glass dish of water, and you use it as a lens to focus the sun's rays and set something on fire.
Okay.
Okay, so you're like a magnifying glass.
I was wondering.
Okay, the point here is, and then what you do is you put something next to the glass, and it burns. So the point is that you cannot create a fire. You cannot create a source of heat of Yontif. If you already have heat and you already have a fire, you want to light from that fire, that's okay. That fire had to already be made from before Yontif. However, to go ahead and actually produce a fire on Yontif, even if you want to use it to prepare food, is not permitted. And that is because it is called molid, creating something new, which is similar to a malacha. That's similar to doing a forbidden, what's considered malach, what's considered a forbidden activity on Yontif. We know there are certain things that are permissible, certain things aren't permissible on Yontif. Well, to go ahead and just to create something new that is similar to a malacha, it's also actually a malacha that you could have done before Yontif, right? Because lighting a fire is lighting a fire. Not going to make a difference if you light it before Yontif or after Yontif, at least your original fire. So therefore, we say that when it comes to creating a fire, producing a new fire, that you can't do, but you can light from what we call an existing flame. Now, the next part of the Mishnah is a different reason behind the prohibition, which translates as, you may not heat up tiles to roast food on them. Now, these tiles were made out of earthenware. I believe that these tiles were not used specifically for roasting food on them, but maybe they were. I'm not sure. Here, though, is what you want to do is you heat up this tile. You heat up this piece of this tile that's made out of clay. And then when you heat it up, you roast something on top of it. Now, theoretically, again, you're preparing food. What should be the problem? The problem is something completely different, and that is that we are talking about a new tile. It's never been used before. The first time it hits the fire hardens it. The fire actually completes its processing. When you want to when you make something out of clay, you want to burn it, you want to heat it up because that hardens it. So here we're talking about that this is a new tile made out of clay. It's the first time it's being heated, and by doing that, the fire strengthens it. And it's completed for whatever its exact designated purpose is meant to be.
It burns it, basically.
So the point is that by heating it up, it's like putting it in a kiln, right? It's like hardening it like you would any kind of pottery that you want to harden, clay that you want to harden. And being that that's the completion of the process of this tile, you actually are transgressing the prohibition of what's called makeh b'patish, putting on the final blow. So therefore, the Mishnah says, you cannot heat up the tiles to roast with them, means a new tile, a tile that's never been heated. If it's ever been heated, you cannot heat up that tile for its first time, even though your intention of heating it up is in order to use them for roasting food. But nonetheless, it's a problem of completing the tile. Okay, next. V'oid Amar Rebbe Eliezer also said. Now, also means it's continuing from the back from something else. And how the commentaries explain is that in the previous Mishnah Vav, the sage Rebbe Eliezer told us a leniency regarding muktzah. And now we're going to get another leniency from Rebbe Eliezer regarding muktzah. V'oidam Rebbe Eliezer. Rebbe Eliezer also said, Oy made Adam al ha-muktzah erev Shabbos b'shvius. I'm going to translate it first, I'll explain it. A person can stand by fruits that are drying, that are muktzah. He can stand there erev Shabbos during the Shemitah year, and say, from here I'm going to eat tomorrow. So what's happening is like this. We're referring here to figs or grapes that were put out in the sun to dry. While they are drying, they are not edible. As such, they are muktzah, for they have been set apart from use. Now, what it means is like this. Remember, we mentioned there's a machlokes, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, about whether Rabbi Yehuda holds a muktzah, Rabbi Shimon doesn't. Now, what that means is that Rabbi Yehuda's muktzah is where you don't have plans to use something. There's no plan to use it. Rabbi Yehuda says that makes it muktzah. That's called setting it aside from use. You can't use it on Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon says no. In this case, when you take those fruits, those figs and grapes, and you put them out to dry, it's not like you're not planning on using them. You are basically, with intent, putting them in a situation where they will become inedible. You're directly making them inedible. So that means that according to everyone, you've set them aside from usage. They're inedible. It seems that when you're making raisins, right, the grapes kind of rot first at some point, and then they dry out, and then they can be eaten. There's a point where they're inedible. So therefore, we say like this. So in that sense, you've got if you're drying out grapes and figs, they're muktzah. Our Mishna is talking about the following. Our Mishna speaks of fruits that have dried to a point where some people would eat them, but others would not. Therefore, the muktzah status of these fruits is going to depend on the owner. If he shows that he intends to eat them on Shabbos or Yom Tov, they're permitted. Otherwise, they're muktzah. So you've got these grapes, you've got these figs that are drying. They're at a stage that some people will eat it, some people won't. So in order to remove them from their status of muktzah that they had previously when they were completely inedible, the person who owns them, who wants to eat them, has to actually designate them for eating and saying, I'm going to eat them on Shabbos or Yom Tov. By doing that, they're not set aside anymore, and they wouldn't be muktzah.
Does that force you to eat them?
No. Now, so the point is you're going to go ahead now. So essentially the point of the Mishnah is like this. You're going to go, it's going to be Erev Shabbos. It's going to be before Shabbos. You got to designate it before Shabbos. If it enters Shabbos muktzah, you can't change its status on Shabbos. So you're there Erev Shabbos, and you're going to go ahead and say, I'm going to eat from here. Am I going to eat them all? No, I'm not going to eat them all. But from here, I'm going to eat me, and some of them I'm going to eat tomorrow. And that's enough to go ahead and remove the muktzah status from the ones that you will eat tomorrow. At this point of time, we don't know which ones you're going to eat. But by saying from here, I'm going to eat, you're designating some of them for eating. According to Rebbe Lezer, that works enough to say that whatever you eat tomorrow is not considered muktzah. What you don't eat tomorrow, you can't move. It is muktzah. What you decide to eat tomorrow, that was considered designated from Erev Shabbos, and it's not muktzah, and go ahead and eat. But the Mishnah said, we're talking about that this is Erev Shabbos Bashvius, during the Shemitah year. That's what it says. We're talking about during the Shemitah year, like why the Shemitah year, and why the Shemitah year different than any other year. So the explanation is like this. During the Shemitah year, which is the 7th year of the cycle, where we say you cannot plant, you cannot plow, you cannot work the land, and anything that grows off the land on its own is considered hefker. It's ownerless. You can't stop people from taking it. Okay. Something that is ownerless is exempt from separating Trumas and Maasros. We know that when we have new produce every year, the certain portion of the produce has to go to the Kohen, certain portion has to go to the Levi, certain portion you have to, depending on which year it is. And until you actually separate those portions, you're not allowed to eat from it. It's called tevel. You're not allowed to eat from it. You are not allowed, if you have tevel, you have untithed fruits, produce, and you want to tithe it on Shabbos, you can't do that on Shabbos. It has to be done before Shabbos. It has to be done before Shabbos. You can't separate it on Shabbos. So the thing is like this. The point of the Mishnah is that clearly the discussion of the Mishnah is to talk about muktzah. Is it muktzah or not? So we say, okay, if you say you're going to eat from some of them before Shabbos, it's not muktzah. But there's another issue. The other issue is that we're talking about grapes and figs. You need to separate Trumas and Maasros from them, right? Before you eat it. Forget about muktzah. If you don't separate the tithings from the produce, you can't eat it anyway. And that itself would say it's muktzah, but you can't do anything with it. It's muktzah. Now, so during any other year where you have to separate Trumas and Maasros, so you've got these grapes and figs. They're drying out. Typically, you will not, the owner will not have separated Shemus and Maasros from it before it's completed. Before the process is completing, you're not even obligated to separate it. Before the process is completed, it's not edible. You're not planning on eating it. And therefore, if you're talking about going over to these grapes and figs that are sitting out there in the field drying, is the assumption that you already separated Shemus and Maasros from it? No, it's not. It's not, because it's typically not going to be separated at that stage until it's really complete. Okay, so if so, forget about the issue. Did I designate them? Did I not designate them? I can't eat them anyway. They're tevel. I didn't separate Shemus and Maasros, and that itself would make it muktzah. So therefore, the Mishnah said, you know what the case is? It's Shemitah year. During Shemitah year, you don't have to separate Shemus and Maasros. There's no obligation because it's hefker. Anything that's ownerless, there's no obligation to separate Shemus and Maasros from. So therefore, all you need to do during the Shemitah year on Erev Shabbos with these figs and grapes is designate and say, tomorrow I'm going to eat from here. And there's nothing else in your way now. It's not muktzah because it's not set aside. And there's no problem of that you can't eat it because you didn't separate Shemus and Maasros. Now, the truth is that let's say it was not the Shemitah year and you did separate Shemus and Maasros before. You did. You could. You're not obligated to, but if you do, it works. And let's say before it was completed, you separated Shemus and Maasros. All right. So that's another case where the only thing I have to deal with now is muktzah. All right. So if I designate it, I say I'm going to eat it tomorrow, you'll be good. The Mishnah just dealt with a case where you're going to have the simplest situation where the only thing you got to deal with is designation and not anything else. And therefore it said it's during the Shemitah year. But the point that we have to now bear in mind for the conclusion of the Mishnah is that what Rebbe Eliezer said, I'm going over to these figs and grapes, which we said some people would eat them, some people wouldn't. And therefore, you've got to designate them and say, you're going to eat them. So Rebbe Eliezer said, all he says is, Mikan ani oichel machar. From here, I will eat. He doesn't designate which ones. He just says, I'm going to eat from here. And Rebbe Eliezer said that's good enough to designate it for usage. The Chachamim say, you have to mark it off. You have to specifically designate which ones you are going to eat. You can't make a general designation, from here I will eat, and say that now it's considered designations for the ones you land up eating tomorrow. The ones you're going to eat tomorrow, you have to mark them off. Okay, I'm going to eat from these grapes until these grapes. Now that you've designated specifically which ones you're going to eat, they will not be muktzah tomorrow. But if you don't designate specifically which ones, then that's not called a designation, and they still remain muktzah because that's what they were before. Before they were completely inedible, they were for sure muktzah. Now they're somewhat edible. If you want to make them be considered usable and prepared for usage, you got to designate it. But the designation, according to the Chachamim, has to be specific. Otherwise, it's not a designation, and they remain muktzah. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.
If you designate them and you didn't eat them.
So you didn't.